The year is 1349. A cold morning spreads across the city. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a large medieval marketplace. The air is damp and heavy. Above you, gray clouds hang low in the sky. Behind you rise the massive stone towers of the cathedral, stretching high into the cold morning air. This city is Tournai. Only a year ago, this square was full of life. Merchants filled the market stalls with bright, colorful cloth. Raw wool arrived from England and was turned into fine fabric by skilled craftsmen. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakeries, mixing with the scent of wine, spices, and smoke from nearby workshops. Children ran between the legs of traders and travelers. Blacksmiths hammered iron in their forges. Weavers worked endlessly at their looms, producing cloth that would travel across Europe. The city was alive with sound. But today, everything is different. The square is nearly empty. The market stalls are closed. Very few people walk the streets. An eerie silence hangs in the air. Then you hear a sound, the slow cracking of wooden wheels against cobblestones. A cart rolls across the square. It moves slowly. And on that cart lie bodies, wrapped in stained linen. Some of the cloth has slipped loose. A small child's hand hangs over the side. A woman's dark hair moves slightly in the cold wind. The cart is not heading toward the market. It is heading towards the cemetery. One cart passes, then another appears, and then another. By the end of this day, these carts will make dozens of trips. Within 3 months, this city will lose half of its population. The catastrophe that has arrived here will later be known as the Black Death. And this is only the beginning. Before the catastrophe arrived, life in the city moved with a steady and familiar rhythm. The city of Tournai was one of the wealthiest cloth centers in Northern Europe. Its prosperity came from wool. Raw fleece arrived from England by ship and river barges. Inside the city walls, skilled craftsmen cleaned it, spun it into thread, and wove it into fine cloth. From there, merchants exported these fabrics across the continent. In the merchant quarter, wealthy trading families lived in tall stone houses with glass windows, an expensive luxury in the 14th century. Their homes were decorated with tapestries and carved wooden furniture. Servants moved through the halls carrying food, wine, and ledgers filled with trade accounts. Not far away, in the artisan districts, the rhythm of daily work never stopped. Weavers sat at their looms from sunrise to sunset. Fullers pounded cloth in vats of water and chemicals to strengthen the fabric. Dyers worked in steaming workshops, turning plain wool into deep reds, blues, and purples that wealthy nobles across Europe desired. The streets were loud and alive. Carts rattled across cobblestones. Apprentices ran errands for their masters. Merchants discussed overprices in Flemish, French, and Italian. And above it all, the cathedral bells rang through the air, marking the hours of the day. Morning prayers, midday work, evening rest. In the crowded districts near the city walls lived the poorest residents. Laborers, servants, and widows crowded into small wooden homes that leaned against one another along narrow streets. Life was harder there, but it was still life. Children played in the alleys. Families shared bread at long wooden tables. And every Sunday, the entire city gathered in churches to pray. To the people of the city, this rhythm felt permanent, stable, safe. But far to the south, in distant ports and trading cities, something terrible had already begun to move across Europe. A disease no one truly understood. A sickness that traveled silently along trade routes. And soon, it would reach the gates of Tournai. In the autumn of 1348, the first rumors began to arrive. They came quietly at first, carried by merchants, sailors, and moving travelers along the trade routes of Europe. Stories from the south, stories that sounded impossible. In distant ports across the Mediterranean, people were dying from a strange and terrifying illness. Entire neighborhoods were falling silent. Ships were arriving with crews already dead. Some cities had thousands lost in only a few weeks. But for the people of Tournai, these places felt very far away. Italy was warm. France was far to the south. And people believed that such diseases belonged to those distant lands. The physicians of the city tried to reassure everyone. They explained that the cold northern air would protect the city. They spoke about winds and seasons, about how the climate of the north was different from the crowded ports of the Mediterranean. According to their understanding, disease came from corrupted air, from poisonous vapors rising from the earth, and the cold winter air, they believed, would keep such vapors away. So life continued. Markets opened every morning. Ships still arrived at the river port. Merchants continued their trade. The cathedral bells still rang across the city. But the rumors kept coming. Travelers spoke of towns where the streets were empty, of priests performing funeral rites all day without rest, of families dying within a single week. Some described the symptoms: a sudden fever, painful swellings in the neck and groin, dark spots spreading across the skin, and death, sometimes within a single day. Still, many people refused to believe it. Surely such a horror could never reach their city. But the truth was already moving north, silent, invisible, traveling the same roads and rivers that carried the wealth of Europe. And soon, it would arrive at the gates of Tournai. In late February of 1349, the first victim appeared. It began quietly, at the river port. The docks of Tournai were always busy. Ships arrived daily carrying wool, grain, and goods from across Europe. Dock workers unloaded heavy cargo from the boats, moving barrels and sacks along the riverfront warehouses. On that morning, one of the port workers suddenly felt ill. At first, it seemed like nothing more than exhaustion. Long hours of labor at the docks often left men weak and tired. But this was different. The man began to feel a sudden and violent fever. His head was pounded, his body trembled. Within hours, the sickness grew worse. A painful swelling appeared on his neck, hard and swollen beneath the skin. The pain was unbearable. When anyone tried to touch it, he cried out in agony. The other workers stepped back in fear. None of them had seen anything like this before. By evening, the man was already dying. His breathing grew shallow. His skin burned with fever. And before the night was over, he was dead. At first, the city did not panic. People believed it was only a strange illness, a rare sickness that had struck a single unfortunate man. But the next morning, 3 more dock workers became sick, then a merchant who had visited the port, then one of his servants. Within days, the strange sickness began to appear in homes across the city. And slowly, the people of Tournai began to realize something terrifying. The rumors from the south had finally arrived. The plague had entered the city. At first, the strange illness seemed isolated, just a single death at the river port, then a few more. But within days, something terrifying began to happen. More people started getting sick. Another dock worker fell ill, then a merchant who had visited the port, then the merchant's servant. Soon entire households were infected. The sickness spread in ways no one could understand. It appeared sudden. A man could feel perfectly healthy in thee and be dead before the sun set. The symptoms of violent fever, burning heat in the body, painful swellings forming in the neck, the armpits, or the groin. Some GR victims screamed in agony when anyone tried to touch them. Dark spots appeared on the ski bruises that slowly turned black. Within hours, the sick became delirio. Some cried out in fear. Others begged for, many simply collapsed into silence. The speed of the disease terrified even neighbors who had shared meals together only days earlier were now afraid to families shut their doors. Markets grew. People began avoiding crowds. The physicians they bled their patients to remove. They burned herbs to cleanse the air. They warned people to avoid bathing, believe. But no treatment slowed the disease. No prayer stop. The illness moved through the city like a strength street by street, house. And with every passing day, the people of Tournai, the plague had come to stay. As the sickness spread through the city, fear began to change everything. People no longer true neighbors who once shared food and laughter now kept their distance. Doors were closed, windows were shuttered. Families stayed inside their homes, afraid of the invisible danger moving through the city. But when fear grows, and in the 14th century, the only explanation many could imagine was this: God was angry. The church leaders of Tournai began to preach that the plague was a punishment for human sin. They spoke of pride, greed, and corruption. They warned that the city had become too wealthy, too comfortable, according to them. Only are soon. Large religious gatherings filled the streets. Thousands of citizens walked barefoot through the city in long processions. They carried holy relics and wooden crosses. Priests led prayers through the crowded streets as people begged for mercy. Inside the great cathedral, the air grew thick with incense, and men and women knelt for hours, confessing their sins. Some wept openly. Others whispered prayers, hoping that God might spare their families. But a strange and terrifying movement began to appear in cities across Europe. Groups known as flagellants. They believed that these men walked through the streets bare-chested, whipping them. They sang prayers between the blows. Some people watched in horror. Others joined them. But despite all the prayers, despite all the suffering, the sickness did not stop. Every day more people fell ill. And slowly the people of Tournai began to understand some faith alone could not save them. As the weeks passed, life in the city began to break apart. The sickness was everywhere. Every street, every district, every family seemed to know someone who had fallen ill. In the beginning, the city had tried to continue as normal. Markets opened, merchants traded, workshops stayed busy. But slowly, everything began to change. The markets grew quiet. Merchants stopped arriving from other cities. Traders feared the sickness and avoided the roads leading to Tournai. Stalls that once overflowed with cloth and goods now stood empty. The sound of bargaining and laughter disappeared from the square. Many workshops closed as craftsmen fell sick. Looms stood silent. Forges grew cold. Even the busy river port became quieter. Ships no longer arrived as often. Some captains refused to enter the harbor, afraid that the disease might spread to their crews. Across the city, doors remained shut. Families stayed inside their homes, hoping to avoid infection. Some houses were marked with illness. Others became strangely silent. Entire families sometimes died within a matter of days. Soon the streets themselves began to change. Fewer people walked outside. Children no longer played in the alleys. The once lively city began to feel like a place of shadows. The only sounds that remained were the church bells and the rumble of wooden carts carrying the dead. Every day the number of bodies increased. At first, families tried to bury their loved ones properly, but as the deaths multiplied, even this became difficult. Gravediggers worked day and night. Priests rushed from house to house, giving last prayers to the dying. Exhaustion spread through the city, just as surely as the disease itself. Slowly, the people of Tournai began to realize a terrible truth. The life they had known was collapsing around them. By the spring of 1349, the plague had reached its most terrifying peak. Every day, more people died. The gravediggers could no longer keep up with the number of bodies. At first, families tried to bury their loved ones properly. Funeral prayers were said. Priests walked with the dead to the cemeteries. But soon, even this became impossible. Too many people were dying. The small church graveyards filled quickly. And so the city began digging great trenches outside the Tournai, mass graves, long sometimes dozens in a single grave, sometimes hundreds. Workers covered the body. The air around the burial fields grew heavy and foul. The cards of the dead never seemed to stop. Day after day, they rolled through the silent streets. But after months of endless death, something began to change. The number of new victims slowly started to fall. Not because the city had found a cure, but because there were simply fewer people left to infect. By the early summer of 1349, the great wave of sickness finally began to fade. The cards carried fewer bodies. The church bells rang less often, and slowly, the survivors began to emerge from their homes. They stepped into a city that felt unfamiliar. The surrounding streets stood empty. The houses were abandoned. The workshops were silent. Families had vanished. In only a few months, nearly half the population of Tournai had died. But life somehow continued. The survivors returned to the markets. Craftsmen reopened their workshops. Little by little, the city began to breathe again. Yet nothing would ever be the same. The people who lived through the plague would remember it for the rest of their lives. They spoke of a time before the Great Death and a time after it. The plague had changed everything. It shattered old traditions. It weakened old systems of power. And it reminded humanity of something that history repeats again and again. Even the greatest cities can be brought to their knees by something invisible. But even after unimaginable tragedy, human life endures. And the story of Tournai did not end in 1349. It simply began a new chapter